The day I married Jonathan, his mother Miriam smiled at me with such warmth that I actually believed she was happy for us. I had no idea that behind that sweet grandmother facade lurked a woman so twisted and manipulative that she would stop at nothing to destroy my marriage, poison my children against me, and reclaim her son as her own. But every monster has a weakness, and when I found hers, I made sure she paid the ultimate price for 5 years of psychological torture. My name is Rebecca, and this is the story of how I survived the mother-in-law from hell, and got my revenge in the most devastating way possible. When I first met Jonathan Blackwood, I thought he was too good to be true. He was successful, kind, handsome, and treated me like I was the most precious thing in his world. We met at a charity gala where I was working as an event coordinator, and he was there representing his family's construction company. The attraction was instant and overwhelming. Jonathan was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. He was 32, established in his career, and ready to settle down. I was 28, building my own event planning business, and dreaming of finding someone to share my life with. We fell in love quickly and completely, and within 8 months, he proposed with a ring that took my breath away. The only shadow in our perfect romance was his mother, Miriam Blackwood. She was 63 years old, recently widowed, and completely devoted to her only son. Jonathan often talked about how much his mother had sacrificed for him after his father died when he was 15. She had worked multiple jobs to put him through college, supported his business ventures, and had been his closest confidant through every major decision in his life. "She is going to love you," Jonathan assured me before our first meeting. "She has been waiting for me to find the right woman, and I know you are exactly what she has been hoping for." Our first meeting took place at Miriam's elegant townhouse, where she had prepared an elaborate dinner. She greeted me with a warm hug and told me how thrilled she was to finally meet the woman who had captured her son's heart. She was impeccably dressed, perfectly coiffed, and had the kind of refined mannerisms that spoke of old money and good breeding. Throughout the evening, Miriam was charming and gracious. She asked thoughtful questions about my career, complimented my dress, and shared amusing stories about Jonathan's childhood. She even showed me photo albums and told me how happy she was that Jonathan had found someone who clearly made him so happy. I left that dinner feeling like I had won the lottery. Not only did I have an amazing fiancé, but I was also gaining a mother-in-law who seemed genuinely excited to welcome me into the family. Growing up as an only child with parents who had died in a car accident when I was 25, the prospect of having a loving extended family meant everything to me. But I should have paid closer attention to the subtle signs that something was not quite right. During that first dinner, I noticed how Miriam touched Jonathan constantly, stroking his arm while she talked, adjusting his collar, running her fingers through his hair. When he got up to help serve dessert, she watched him with an intensity that seemed almost possessive. And when he laughed at my jokes or showed me affection, I caught glimpses of something dark flickering across her face. The engagement period was when Miriam's true nature began to reveal itself, though so gradually that I barely noticed at first. She would make innocent comments that somehow managed to undermine my confidence or create doubt in Jonathan's mind about our relationship. "Rebecca, dear, are you sure you want to wear that dress to the charity auction?" she would ask with a concerned expression. "It is lovely, of course, but I worry it might be a bit too casual for such an important event. Jonathan's business associates will be there, and first impressions matter so much." Or she would say things like, "Jonathan, you look tired lately. Are you sure you are not working too hard trying to keep up with Rebecca's social calendar? You know how important it is for you to maintain your health and focus on your career." Each comment was perfectly reasonable on its surface, but they were designed to make me feel inadequate and to plant seeds of doubt about whether I was right for Jonathan. She was a master of psychological manipulation, skilled at making her attacks seem like loving concern. The wedding planning process became a nightmare. Miriam insisted on being involved in every decision, claiming that since she was paying for half the wedding, she should have equal say in the arrangements. What she really wanted was to control every aspect of our special day, and to make sure that her preferences took precedence over mine. She criticized every choice I made. The flowers were too common, the venue was too modern, the menu was too trendy. She would make these criticisms privately to Jonathan, presenting them as helpful suggestions from someone with more experience and refined taste. Then Jonathan would come to me and gently suggest that maybe we should consider his mother's ideas. She really does have excellent taste, he would say, and she knows what kind of events impress people in our social circle. Maybe we should listen to her suggestions. I found myself constantly having to defend my choices and explain why my vision for our wedding was valid. It was exhausting and demoralizing, and it created tension between Jonathan and me that had never existed before. The worst part was that Miriam always maintained her sweet, caring facade when other people were around. She would gush about how excited she was for the wedding and how much she loved me like a daughter. But when we were alone, her mask would slip just enough for me to see the coldness in her eyes. "Rebecca, dear," she said to me one afternoon when we were alone in the bridal shop, "I hope you understand that Jonathan has very specific needs. He is used to a certain standard of living and a particular way of doing things. I would hate for him to feel like he had to compromise his happiness for the sake of marriage." The message was clear. I was not good enough for her son, and she would be watching to make sure I did not disappoint him. Despite Miriam's interference, Jonathan and I had a beautiful wedding. I managed to incorporate most of my original vision, while making enough compromises to keep the peace. As I walked down the aisle and saw Jonathan's face light up with love and joy, I felt confident that we could overcome any challenges that lay ahead. I was completely unprepared for the psychological warfare that was about to begin. The first year of marriage was when Miriam really began her campaign to destroy my relationship with Jonathan. She would call him multiple times every day, always with some urgent matter that required his immediate attention. She would schedule family events and social obligations without consulting me, then act hurt when I could not attend due to my work commitments. "I am so sorry, everyone," she would say to the assembled guests. "Rebecca could not make it tonight. She is so busy with her little business that she rarely has time for family anymore." She made sure that Jonathan heard these comments, and she would follow up with private conversations about how worried she was that I did not prioritize family relationships. She would remind him of how his father had worked long hours and missed important family moments, and how that had affected their marriage. "I just want you to be happy, darling," she would tell Jonathan. "But I worry that Rebecca does not understand what it means to be part of a close family. She grew up differently than we did, and she might not realize how important these relationships are." Miriam also began inserting herself into our daily lives in increasingly intrusive ways. She had a key to our house, which Jonathan had given her for emergencies, and she would use it to let herself in at inappropriate times. I would come home from work to find her rearranging our furniture or reorganizing our kitchen cabinets. "I hope you do not mind, dear," she would say with a bright smile. "I noticed that you had things arranged in a way that was not very efficient, so I thought I would help you out." When I expressed discomfort with her entering our home without permission, she would look hurt and confused. "But Rebecca, I am family. I thought you would appreciate the help, especially since you are so busy with work." She would then tell Jonathan that I had been rude to her and had made her feel unwelcome in her own son's home. Jonathan would ask me to be more understanding of his mother's good intentions, and I would end up feeling like the unreasonable one. The situation became even more complicated when Jonathan and I decided to start a family. I was thrilled when I became pregnant with our first child. But Miriam's reaction was a mixture of joy and possessiveness that made me deeply uncomfortable. "Oh, Jonathan," she exclaimed when we shared the news, "I am going to be a grandmother. This baby is going to be so lucky to have me to teach them all the important things in life." Miriam immediately began making plans for the baby without consulting me. She picked out nursery themes, bought furniture, and even started interviewing nannies. When I tried to assert my own preferences, she would act shocked and hurt. "Rebecca, I am just trying to help," she would say with tears in her eyes. "I have experience with babies, and I know what is best for them. I raised Jonathan perfectly well on my own, and I can certainly help you raise this child properly." The implication was clear. I was inexperienced and incompetent, and she would need to step in to make sure the baby was raised correctly. During my pregnancy, Miriam's behavior became increasingly bizarre and controlling. She would show up at my doctor's appointments uninvited, claiming that she wanted to be involved in every aspect of her grandchild's development. She would contradict my decisions about prenatal care, diet, and exercise, always presenting her opinions as facts backed by her superior experience. "Rebecca, you really should not be drinking that much water," she would say during one appointment. When I was pregnant with Jonathan, my doctor told me that too much water could be harmful to the baby. She would make these statements in front of my healthcare providers, undermining my credibility and making me feel foolish. When I tried to discuss her behavior with Jonathan, he would defend her actions as natural excitement about becoming a grandmother. "She is just trying to help," he would say. "She went through pregnancy and childbirth alone, and she wants to make sure you have all the support she never had." The birth of our daughter, Emma, marked the beginning of an even more intense phase of Miriam's campaign. She moved into our house for 2 weeks after the delivery, claiming that she needed to help with the baby and teach me how to be a proper mother. What followed were 2 weeks of absolute hell. Miriam took over all aspects of Emma's care, pushing me aside whenever I tried to bond with my own daughter. She would wake up in the middle of the night to feed Emma, claiming that I needed my rest. She would change her diapers, give her baths, and rock her to sleep, all while making subtle comments about my inexperience and inadequacy. "Do not worry, Rebecca," she would say as she took Emma from my arms. "Newborns can sense when someone is nervous or unsure. I will take care of her until you feel more confident." She criticized everything I did. The way I held Emma, the way I tried to breastfeed, even the way I talked to her. She would hover over me constantly, correcting my every move and making me feel like I was failing as a mother from the very beginning. "Rebecca, you are holding her too tightly," she would say. "She needs to feel secure, not constrained. Here, let me show you the proper way." The worst part was that Emma seemed to respond better to Miriam than to me. After 2 weeks of minimal contact with her own mother, Emma would fuss when I held her and calm down immediately when Miriam took her. This broke my heart and made me feel like I was already losing my daughter to my mother-in-law's manipulation. When I finally worked up the courage to ask Miriam to leave and give us some privacy as a new family, she reacted with shock and theatrical hurt. She told Jonathan that I was being selfish and preventing her from bonding with her granddaughter. She claimed that she was only trying to help, and that my rejection of her assistance was proof that I did not appreciate family. Jonathan was caught in the middle, torn between his loyalty to his mother and his desire to support his wife. The stress of the situation was taking a toll on our marriage, and I could see that Miriam was achieving exactly what she wanted: division between Jonathan and me. As Emma grew older, Miriam's interference became even more problematic. She would contradict my parenting decisions in front of Emma, undermining my authority and confusing our daughter about who was really in charge. "Grandma Miriam, can I have a cookie?" Emma would ask. "Of course, darling," Miriam would say, even though I had just told Emma that she needed to eat her dinner first. When I would try to enforce my rules, Miriam would step in and say, "Oh, Rebecca, one little cookie will not hurt her. You worry too much." This pattern repeated itself constantly. Miriam would allow Emma to do things I had forbidden, buy her toys I had said no to, and feed her foods I was trying to limit. She was systematically teaching Emma that my rules did not matter, and that Grandma Miriam was the real authority figure in her life. The psychological impact on Emma was devastating. She began to prefer spending time with Miriam over being with me. She would run to Miriam when she was upset, ask for Miriam's permission before doing things, and even call for Miriam instead of me when she woke up from nightmares. "Mama, why do you always say no to everything?" Emma asked me one day when she was 4 years old. "Grandma Miriam says yes, and she is nicer than you." Hearing those words from my own daughter was like a knife to my heart. Miriam had successfully driven a wedge between Emma and me, and she was doing it with such skill that even Emma could not see the manipulation. When Emma was 5 and our son Tyler was 2, Miriam's behavior reached new levels of toxicity. She began making comments about how different the 2 children were, always favoring Emma while subtly criticizing Tyler. "Emma is such a bright, well-behaved child," she would say in Tyler's presence. "She is so much like Jonathan was at that age. Tyler is, well, he is still finding his way, I suppose." She would shower Emma with gifts and attention while giving Tyler minimal acknowledgement. She would take Emma on special outings and leave Tyler at home with me, claiming that he was too young to appreciate the activities they were doing. The favoritism was destroying Tyler's self-esteem and creating resentment between the siblings. Emma began to treat Tyler the same way Miriam did, with condescension and dismissal. Tyler became clingy and insecure, desperately seeking the approval and attention that his grandmother withheld from him. As the years passed, Miriam's manipulation became more sophisticated and damaging. She would have private conversations with Emma, filling her head with ideas about how I was not a good mother, and how she was lucky to have such a wonderful grandmother to take care of her. "Your mother works too much," she would tell Emma. "She does not understand what is really important in life. But do not worry, darling. Grandma Miriam will always be here to take care of you properly." She would encourage Emma to keep secrets from me, creating a special bond between them that excluded me from my own daughter's life. Emma began to tell Miriam things about our family that she would not share with me, and Miriam would use this information to further undermine my relationship with Jonathan. "Jonathan, I am worried about Emma," she would say. "She told me some concerning things about how Rebecca has been treating her. I do not want to interfere, but I think you should know what is happening in your own home." The lies Miriam told about me were subtle but devastating. She would claim that Emma had told her I was always angry, that I did not spend enough time with the children, that I was more interested in my work than in my family. None of this was true, but Miriam presented it as innocent concern from a loving grandmother, who only wanted what was best for her grandchildren. Jonathan began to question my parenting and my priorities. He would ask me why Emma seemed to prefer his mother's company, why Tyler was so clingy and insecure, why there was always tension in our house when Miriam was around. He could not see that all of these problems were direct results of his mother's manipulation. "Maybe you should try to be more patient with the kids," he would suggest. "Maybe you should spend less time on work and more time on family. Maybe you should try to learn from my mother's experience instead of always being defensive." Each suggestion felt like a betrayal. My own husband was taking his mother's side against me, and I felt completely alone in my struggle against her psychological warfare. The breaking point came when Emma was 7 years old. Miriam had convinced her to lie to me about where she was going after school, and instead of going to her friend's house as she had told me, she went to Miriam's house. When I could not find Emma at the planned location, I panicked and called the police. I spent 3 hours in absolute terror, imagining the worst possible scenarios and blaming myself for losing track of my daughter. When the police finally located Emma at Miriam's house, she was playing happily and seemed confused about why everyone was so upset. "But Grandma Miriam said it was okay," Emma explained. "She said it would be a special surprise, and that you would understand." Miriam acted shocked and apologetic, claiming that she had not realized Emma had lied to me about her plans. She said she thought I knew where Emma was, and that she would never have kept her if she had known I was worried. But I could see the satisfaction in Miriam's eyes. She had orchestrated the entire situation to make me look like a negligent mother, who could not keep track of her own child. She had used Emma as a pawn in her psychological game, and she had nearly given me a heart attack in the process. That night, I had a complete breakdown. I sobbed in Jonathan's arms and begged him to see what his mother was doing to our family. I told him about years of manipulation, interference, and psychological abuse. I explained how Miriam was destroying my relationships with our children and undermining our marriage. Jonathan listened with growing concern, but his response was not what I had hoped for. Instead of recognizing his mother's behavior as abusive, he suggested that I was overreacting and that perhaps I needed professional help to deal with my paranoia about his mother. "Rebecca, I know my mother can be a bit overwhelming sometimes," he said, "but she loves us and she loves the kids. I think you are seeing malice where there is just misguided affection. Maybe you should talk to someone about why you feel so threatened by her presence in our lives." His suggestion that I needed therapy for recognizing his mother's abuse was the final straw. I realized that Miriam had been so successful in her manipulation that she had turned my own husband against me. I was fighting a battle I could not win through normal means. That is when I decided to fight fire with fire. If Miriam wanted to play psychological games, I would show her what real strategic thinking looked like. I began documenting everything. I kept detailed records of Miriam's visits, her comments, her interference with the children, and the impact her behavior was having on our family. I recorded conversations when possible and took photographs of the messes she would create in our home. I also began researching Miriam's background more thoroughly. I had always accepted Jonathan's version of his family history, but I realized I had never independently verified the stories about his mother's supposed sacrifices and perfect parenting. What I discovered was shocking and gave me exactly the ammunition I needed to end Miriam's reign of terror. Through public records, old newspaper articles, and conversations with people who had known the family years earlier, I uncovered a very different picture of Miriam's past. The story of the devoted widow who had sacrificed everything for her son was a carefully constructed lie. Miriam had not been a loving, supportive mother. She had been investigated by Child Protective Services multiple times for neglect and psychological abuse. Jonathan's father had not died in an accident. He had committed suicide, leaving behind a note that detailed years of emotional abuse and manipulation at Miriam's hands. The most damning discovery was a series of court documents from a custody battle that had taken place when Jonathan was 16. His paternal grandparents had tried to gain custody of him, presenting evidence that Miriam was psychologically abusing her son and creating an unhealthy, codependent relationship. The court documents described a pattern of behavior that was sickeningly familiar: manipulation, gaslighting, interference with relationships, and emotional incest. Miriam had been using the same tactics on Jonathan that she was now using on our family. The custody case had been dismissed when Jonathan, who had been thoroughly brainwashed by his mother, testified that he wanted to stay with her. But the evidence presented in court painted a clear picture of a woman who was dangerous and manipulative. I also discovered that Miriam had been married twice after Jonathan's father's death, and both marriages had ended in divorce with the husbands citing emotional abuse and manipulation. One of them had filed a restraining order against her, claiming that she had stalked and harassed him after their divorce. Armed with this information, I knew I had the power to expose Miriam for what she really was. But I also knew I had to be strategic about how I used it. If I simply confronted Jonathan with the evidence, he might dismiss it as lies or forgeries. I needed to make sure that when I revealed the truth, it would be impossible for him to deny or rationalize away. I decided to arrange a family gathering where I could present the evidence to Jonathan, the children, and several other family members at the same time. I wanted witnesses, and I wanted to make sure that Miriam could not spin the situation to her advantage. The opportunity came when Emma's 8th birthday approached. I suggested having a large family party and invited Jonathan's aunts, uncles, and cousins, people who had known the family for decades and who would be able to confirm or deny the information I had discovered. During the party, I waited until everyone was gathered in the living room. Then I stood up and said I had something important to share with the family. Before we continue celebrating, I began. I think it is time that everyone knew the truth about Miriam and what she has been doing to our family. I presented the evidence methodically and calmly. I showed the court documents, the newspaper articles about the suicide, the restraining orders, and the Child Protective Services reports. I explained how Miriam had been systematically manipulating our family and destroying my relationships with my children and husband. The room was silent as I spoke, but I could see the recognition dawning on the faces of the older family members. They remembered the custody battle, the suicide, and the strange dynamic between Miriam and Jonathan. They had suspected something was wrong, but they had never spoken up. Miriam tried to deny everything, claiming that the documents were forgeries and that I was having a mental breakdown. But Jonathan's uncle Robert, who had been present during the custody battle, confirmed that everything I had said was true. "We tried to warn you, Jonathan," Robert said sadly. "Your grandparents tried to protect you from her, but you were too young to understand what was happening. We all hoped that marriage and children would help you break free from her control, but she just transferred her obsession to your family." Jonathan looked at his mother with a mixture of shock, hurt, and dawning understanding. For the first time, he was seeing her clearly, without the filter of years of manipulation and gaslighting. "Is it true, Mom?" he asked quietly. "Did Dad really kill himself because of you?" Miriam's mask finally slipped completely. Instead of the sweet, concerned grandmother, she revealed the cold, calculating woman she had always been underneath. Your father was weak, she said with venom in her voice. He could not handle being married to a strong woman who knew what she wanted. Everything I did was to protect you from becoming like him. She turned to me with pure hatred blazing in her eyes. And you, Rebecca, you have been trying to turn my son against me from the beginning. You are jealous of the special relationship Jonathan and I have, and you have been trying to poison him against me with your lies and manipulation. But her words no longer had power over anyone in the room. The truth was out, and everyone could see her for what she really was. Jonathan asked his mother to leave and never return to our home. He told her that she was no longer welcome in our lives, and that she would have no contact with our children unless she agreed to undergo extensive therapy and could prove that she had changed. Miriam's response was to threaten legal action and to claim that we were violating her grandparents' rights. She hired a lawyer and tried to get court-ordered visitation with Emma and Tyler. But when the family court judge reviewed the evidence of her past behavior and her current manipulation, he not only denied her request, but also issued a restraining order protecting our family from her harassment. The aftermath of exposing Miriam was both liberating and challenging. Jonathan was devastated to learn the truth about his mother and his father's death. He entered therapy to work through the trauma of realizing that his entire childhood had been built on manipulation and lies. I am so sorry, Rebecca, he said during one of our healing conversations. I should have seen what she was doing. I should have protected you and the children from her. You were her victim too, I replied. She spent your entire life conditioning you to believe her lies and to prioritize her needs over everyone else's. The important thing is that we know the truth now, and we can protect our family. The impact on our children was significant, but ultimately positive. Emma had to undergo therapy to understand how her grandmother had manipulated her, and to rebuild her relationship with me. It was painful to watch her struggle with the realization that someone she loved had been using her to hurt her mother. I am sorry, Mama, she said during one of our heart-to-heart conversations. I did not know that Grandma Miriam was being mean to you. I thought she was just being nice to me. Tyler, who had been psychologically damaged by Miriam's favoritism and rejection, also needed professional help to rebuild his self-esteem and trust. But without Miriam's toxic influence, both children began to flourish and to develop healthy relationships with both Jonathan and me. The legal consequences for Miriam were limited but satisfying. She could not be prosecuted for the psychological abuse she had inflicted over the years, but the restraining order meant that she could no longer interfere in our lives. She tried to violate it several times, but each attempt only resulted in additional legal penalties and restrictions. The most satisfying part of her downfall was watching her social world collapse. Once the truth about her past came out, other family members began sharing their own stories of her manipulation and abuse. Friends and neighbors who had been impressed by her facade began to see through her act and distance themselves from her. Miriam's carefully constructed image as the perfect mother and grandmother was destroyed, and she was left alone with the consequences of her decades of manipulation and abuse. She had no one to blame but herself, and no one left to manipulate. 3 years have passed since I exposed Miriam's true nature, and our family has healed in ways I never thought possible. Jonathan and I have rebuilt our marriage on a foundation of honesty and mutual support. He now recognizes manipulation tactics, and is committed to protecting our family from anyone who might try to harm us. Our children are thriving without Miriam's toxic influence. Emma has developed into a confident, kind young girl who has a healthy relationship with both her parents. Tyler's self-esteem has recovered, and he no longer lives in fear of being rejected or criticized. Most importantly, I have learned that sometimes the only way to defeat a manipulator is to expose them completely and publicly. Miriam's power came from operating in shadows, planting seeds of doubt and division while maintaining her innocent facade. Once the truth was revealed and she could no longer hide behind lies, her influence evaporated. I have also learned the importance of trusting my instincts and standing up for myself, even when everyone around me was telling me I was wrong. The years of gaslighting and manipulation had made me doubt my own perceptions, but I was right to recognize that something was deeply wrong with Miriam's behavior. Jonathan and I have since welcomed a third child, a daughter named Sarah, and we have been vigilant about protecting her from any potential toxic influences. We have established clear boundaries with extended family members, and have taught our children to recognize manipulation tactics, and to come to us if anyone makes them feel uncomfortable, or tries to turn them against their parents. As for Miriam, she continues to live alone, isolated from the family she destroyed through her own actions. She occasionally tries to reach out through intermediaries or to contact the children through social media, but we remain vigilant and block every attempt. The restraining order is still in effect, and we renew it regularly to ensure that she cannot legally interfere in our lives. She has become a cautionary tale in our extended family, a reminder of how unchecked manipulation and narcissism can destroy relationships and leave a person completely alone. Sometimes I wonder if Miriam ever reflects on the choices she made and the pain she caused. But I have come to understand that true narcissists are incapable of genuine self-reflection or remorse. They see themselves as victims of other people's unreasonable behavior, never acknowledging their own role in creating the conflicts that define their lives. What matters is that my family is safe, healthy, and free from her toxic influence. We have learned to recognize the signs of manipulation and abuse, and we are committed to protecting each other from anyone who might try to harm us. The mother-in-law from hell thought she could destroy my marriage and steal my children. Instead, she lost everything and taught us how strong we could be when we stood together against toxic behavior. That is the power of truth, courage, and refusing to be a victim of someone else's psychological games. In the end, Miriam's attempt to destroy my family only made us stronger and more united. She gave us a gift she never intended: the knowledge that we could overcome any challenge as long as we faced it together with honesty and love. If this story of surviving a toxic mother-in-law and getting the ultimate revenge resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to Revenge Janet for more shocking tales of family drama and justice served. Hit that notification bell, and let me know in the comments what you thought about Miriam's devastating downfall. Remember, toxic people always reveal their true nature eventually, and truth always wins in the end. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next story.